during the 14th century BC, a time when kingdoms rose and fell through war and bloodshed. Egypt witnessed the reign of a ruler unlike any other. His name was Amenhotep III, and he did not conquer with the sword, but with words wrapped in gold. Known as Amenhotep the Magnificent, his rule marked the pinnacle of Egypt's wealth, peace, and international influence. Born in 1401 BC, Amenhotep inherited the throne from his father, Thutmose IV, a relatively minor figure in the vast dynasty of Egypt's rulers. But the true legacy he inherited came not from his father, but from his great-grandfather Thutmose III, who had transformed Egypt into a military powerhouse through relentless campaigns. Amenhotep, however, would chart a different path, elevating diplomacy into an art form that would define his entire reign. From an early age, Amenhotep was immersed in the rigid discipline of royal education. He was taught the sacred Egyptian hieroglyphs and the diplomatic language of the day, Mesopotamian cuneiform, at a time when only 2% of the Egyptian population could read and write. The crown prince was drilled to master the written word. A preserved instructional text from the New Kingdom period reveals the severity of his upbringing, warning students against idleness and urging them to seek wisdom, persevere in study, and submit to correction, even corporal punishment. These harsh teachings forged a mind that would come to manipulate kings, nations, and entire civilizations through language, gifts, and suggestion. When his father died suddenly in 1388 BC, Amenhotep was only 12 years old. Yet despite his youth, he assumed the throne as the 9th ruler of Egypt's 18th dynasty. Rather than being overshadowed by inexperience, the young king quickly asserted himself. He commissioned a series of commemorative scarabs, oval-shaped stones engraved with messages of royal propaganda. These scarabs, shaped like the sacred dung beetle symbolizing the god of rebirth, Khepri acted as early telegrams. They were distributed across the empire to spread news of the king's achievements, starting with his unprecedented marriage to a commoner named Tui. Queen Tui, only 6 years old at the time, was no ordinary woman. She would go on to become one of the most influential figures in Egyptian history. Despite her non-royal blood, Amenhotep named her his great royal wife, a role typically reserved for royal women. This bold move shocked the traditional elites, but it revealed the young king's intention to rule according to his own will and vision. Unlike his war-hardened predecessors, Amenhotep took little interest in military conquest. Instead, he sought to establish Egypt's dominance through luxury, trade, and strategic alliance. His court became a center of splendor. He trained in the arts of war, not to wage them, but to appear powerful enough not to need them. He mastered the bow and the chariot, and commemorated his hunting skills by releasing a series of scarabs detailing his solo slaughter of 102 lions. Hunting lions was more than a sport. It was a performance of power in a time of peace. Yet in his 5th year as pharaoh, that peace was disrupted. In the south, Nubian rebels began attacking trade routes vital to Egypt's economy. At just 16 years old, Amenhotep personally led a military campaign into Nubia. His swift and brutal suppression of the rebellion resulted in the capture of 30,000 prisoners. It would be his only military campaign, but it was enough. The message was clear: Amenhotep may not seek war, but he would not hesitate to defend Egypt's interests. With Nubia pacified, Egypt secured full control over the region's rich deposits of gold, malachite, and copper, resources that would fuel the empire's meteoric rise. It was here that Amenhotep's brilliance shone. Rather than hoard these resources for vanity or personal indulgence, he used them to dominate the political chessboard of the ancient Near East. His neighbors, the Mitanni, the Hittites, the Assyrians, and the Babylonians, were in constant competition for power. But they all wanted one thing more than anything else: Egyptian gold. Amenhotep turned this hunger into leverage. In his 10th year, he married Jilakhepa, daughter of the king of Mitanni, and welcomed her with an entourage of 317 women. The diplomatic significance of this union was monumental. To secure the alliance, Amenhotep sent statues made entirely of gold as wedding gifts. Soon, other kingdoms began to crave similar treatment. Rumors spread across the region that gold was as plentiful in Egypt as sand. Letters from foreign rulers began pouring in. Begging for more, one wrote, "Gold is like the dust of Egypt. You simply gather it up." The pharaoh had created a myth, and he would exploit it for decades to come. Rather than fight wars, Amenhotep fought with gifts and marriages. He offered Egyptian gold to those who would pledge allegiance. In return, foreign rulers gave him their daughters. In a single generation, Amenhotep married women from Aten, Babylon, Assyria, and the Hittites. Each foreign princess was absorbed into his harem, forming bonds that made war politically suicidal for their fathers. In one of the Amarna letters, King Kadashman-Enlil of Babylon, whose sister was already married to Amenhotep, pleaded for more gold, saying his sister in Egypt lived poorly. Amenhotep replied with wry humor, suggesting she should ask him directly for gifts. When the Babylonian king dared to request an Egyptian princess for marriage, the pharaoh responded with sharp pride. From time immemorial, no daughter of the king of Egypt has ever been given to anyone. Instead, he demanded the Babylonian king's daughter. And the king, now ensnared in Egypt's golden web, agreed. Amenhotep then married not only foreign princesses, but two of his own daughters, Sitamun and Iset. While it's unclear whether he fathered children with them, the motive was strategic. He refused to let foreign powers ever claim Egypt through royal bloodlines. His golden diplomacy flooded Egypt with wealth. Foreign lands traded their finest horses, wines, lapis lazuli, copper, and exotic goods for even the hint of Amenhotep's favor. He had turned Egypt into the beating heart of an international economy, and himself into a living legend. As the empire flourished under his reign, Amenhotep turned his attention toward legacy and monument. He began an ambitious campaign of construction that left behind some of the most impressive works in Egyptian history. He commissioned temples, palaces, and colossi that reflected not only Egypt's glory, but his own divine status. One commemorative scarab announced the creation of a mile-long artificial lake in honor of Queen Te. This marvel of engineering connected the royal palace to the Nile River and was designed to retain fertile mud after the annual flood. It was a symbol of abundance, blessing, and power. Central to these grand projects was a man named Amenhotep, son of Hapu, a brilliant architect, scholar, and scribe who became the pharaoh's closest advisor. Entrusted with overseeing temple expansions at Karnak and Luxor, Amenhotep, son of Hapu, was so respected that he was allowed to build his own mortuary temple next to that of the king. Following his death, he was deified and worshipped as a god of healing for centuries, one of only two commoners in Egyptian history to receive such an honor, the other being the legendary Imhotep. With construction surging, the empire glowed with divine artistry. Yet all projects suddenly ceased for nearly 8 years. No new temples, no major expansions, only one thing: statues. More than 700 statues of the goddess Sekhmet were commissioned during this mysterious gap. Sekhmet, the lion-headed deity of war and healing, was believed to both cause and cure plagues. Egyptologists now speculate that a deadly epidemic struck Egypt during this time, and that the statues were offerings meant to appease the goddess and lift her curse. Amid this crisis, the pharaoh is believed to have retreated with Queen Te to their lakeside palace for isolation. Despite this withdrawal, Amenhotep's loyalty to the gods remained visible. However, unlike earlier pharaohs who favored Amun-Ra, Amenhotep began to elevate a lesser-known sun god, Aten. He created a new cult centered around Aten's worship and began sidelining the traditional priesthood. While not abolishing old gods, his preference signaled a theological shift, one that his son would later radicalize. As Amenhotep aged, his body began to fail. Dental decay, arthritis, and obesity plagued the king. His foreign allies, eager to preserve ties with the giver of gold, began sending aid. King Tushratta of Mitanni dispatched a statue of the healing goddess Shoshka, hoping her presence would revive the king's health. In his letter, he wrote, "May Shoshka protect us, my brother and me, 100,000 years, and may our mistress grant us both great joy." For these kings, Amenhotep's survival meant the continued flow of gold, peace, and prosperity. The possibility of a new ruler brought uncertainty and fear. Even from his bed, Amenhotep held the world in the palm of his hand. He had built an empire not through domination, but diplomacy, a web of marriages, myths, and mutual dependence. He had become more than a ruler. He was the center of a golden illusion that the world desperately wanted to believe in. After 38 glorious years on the throne, Amenhotep III passed away in 1351 BC at the age of 50. He was laid to rest in the Valley of the Kings, the final resting place for Egypt's most powerful monarchs. His death marked the end of one of the most prosperous and peaceful reigns in Egyptian history. He left behind one surviving son, Amenhotep IV, who would ascend the throne only to tear down much of what his father had built. Renaming himself Akhenaten, the new pharaoh declared Aten to be the only god, abolished the worship of all others, and moved the capital to a new city dedicated to his chosen deity. He closed temples, dismissed priests, and outlawed the very traditions that had unified Egypt for centuries. While his father had subtly shifted theological power, Akhenaten ignited a revolution that would destabilize the empire. Foreign allies withdrew, the gold stopped flowing. Egypt's dominance crumbled in a single generation. Amenhotep's legacy, however, remained. He had ruled not with terror but with cleverness. His enemies became allies, and his throne became a beacon of light in a world darkened by conflict. Even centuries later, whispers of his reign echoed through ancient texts. Some scholars believe that the story of King Solomon in the Hebrew Bible may have been inspired by Amenhotep. Like Solomon, he ruled over an empire stretching from the Nile to the Euphrates, was famed for his wisdom, built wonders, and filled his courts with foreign princesses. Whether coincidence or historical memory, the parallels remain compelling. Amenhotep the Magnificent was more than a king. He was a symbol of what power could achieve when wielded not through force, but through foresight. He mastered the currency of influence, the art of image, and the theater of divine kingship. In a world where war made legends, he became immortal without ever needing to fight again. His monuments still whisper his name, his letters still bear his wit, his scarabs still speak of glory, and his memory, gilded in diplomacy and stone, endures. In the end, Amenhotep III transformed Egypt not into an empire of fear, but an empire of favor, and through that transformation, he became timeless, forever remembered as Amenhotep the Magnificent.